Hey guys, it's Pat. Yeah, Pat. Transitioning. You got a problem with that? You got answer? Yeah, it's going to be Pat, at least for this month until I return. Guys, before we get into this book, which I really can't wait to throw out, it's in my hands now after this video. Oh, I can't wait to. I'm not going to give it back to the Goodwill or give it to a library. It doesn't deserve to ever be read again. It needs to be taken out of existence. I'm going to throw it out. Presidential Courage, Brave Leaders, and How They Changed America, 1789 to 1989. Michael Beschloss. What? Michael, if somebody invite him to listen to this video? Before we get into this, I didn't know that the United States was this close to a war with France under John Adams. I had no idea. I'm not saying it's a Mandela effect or anything like that, but okay, we'll get into this. But guys, let me just talk about some of the comments I've seen over the last week. If I knew for sure that every single comment was a real person, I would do a, quote, comment show looking at some of these comments. But half of them at this point could be LLMs. That's the chat GPT, the large language models, the LLMs. I'm not going to take the bait. It knows by now, after analyzing my response to comments for 14 years, it knows what gets under my skin, like the last video. We'll get to this potential war under John Adams with France in just a few minutes, and then I can throw this book out. But somebody left generally after this, and I think this was a real person, of course. Generally after this, they left a nice complimentary comment, but it was something in the beginning. It was like, screen exercise. Screen exercise. Oh, no. Okay, guys, let me be very clear. My understanding about reality is presented in the book chapters. There might be a few more tiny things for the rest of my life I kind of pick up on, but for the most part, this is my understanding of reality in the book chapters. Everything else will be fun, or will be like the last video on Chechnya, where you could say fascination, but fascination is fun. It is fascinating to me what went down in Chechnya, how quick the rebuild was, what's at play here with the one world system versus what is presented on the news and what your friends believe. That is fascination to me. Fascination is fun. And the other aspect of this channel will be just somebody else that sees the bizarro world the way you do. Kind of like a Linus blanket. Mostly fun and fascination, and a little bit, let me just see if Matt is still acts sane. That means I might still be sane. There's that aspect of this channel. So 90% going forward will be fun, like we're going to do here. This is fun. I'm not saying it's a Mandela effect, or looking at this book and making fun of it. How there was almost a war with France, and this history that makes no sense. This is fun to me. So if you're going to screen exercise, that's what most of this channel is going to be going forward. What I understand about reality is in the book. See how that works? If you don't want this screen exercise, I appreciate you might come and go, but you don't have to watch every video and say, screen exercise, screen exercise. I'm going to make fun of the news. It's not for you. There's a lot of troll channels that hate me. You can camp on to their coattails. There was a comment that said something like the one world system is nothing new. Like, who said it was new? Did I start the last video saying, guys, I have a new revelation, a brand new revelation, a breakthrough in the truth community. We might be in a one world system. Has anybody else noticed this? Who the hell said it was new? The guy was like, this is nothing new. What the hell? Are you new here? Me and many others have been saying one world system for more than 10 years. And we got it from somebody. We stole it from somebody else. Who the hell said it was new? Another comment said my comments were mean-spirited or something like that. They are, because if there was a comment, I think in the last video or two videos back, where somebody said it, here it comes around again. Somebody said somewhere that Matt is Joe Rogan. That was the comment. And then underneath these comments, I type, thank you very much, sir, for moving our understanding of reality forward. Thank you for contributing to the conversation. There was a comment in the last video, nothing but this, never play that music again. That's it. And yes, if you want to call this mean-spirited, underneath that comment I type, thank you, sir, for helping us understand reality. Thank you for trying to move our understanding forward. Yeah, Matt, you've done it now. Yes, I have. You've let the large language models know exactly what gets under your skin, and those bots are going to turn out. Okay, I don't want to turn off comments, and again, people generally. Many people here like the comments, and I will never do it for that reason, unless the large language models just completely get out of control. One last thing about the Joe Rogan thing. First of all, the AI exists that one of my characters could look like whatever was presented as Stephen Hawking, and one could look like the real me. And see, with the AI, they could do anything. So why would I have to look? I do kind of look like, I guess, Joe Rogan, but I don't take steroids or anything like that. Why would we have to be similar looking? The AI isn't sophisticated enough to make two completely different people seem as the same. They have to like look alike because the AI is not good enough. So that doesn't make any sense there. But here's the other thing. So the job where, that pays my job that pays $100 million contract, my Joe Rogan job, when I do that job, I act like an idiot, a moron. They just interview Elon Musk. Didn't anybody say anything when you started to dig in the parking lot? He says, for the tube thing they want to put underground, we just started digging in the parking lot. Didn't they say nothing? So in that job, I act like a moron. And this job, where I collect $3 a month from people to put food on the table, this job, I actually am intelligent. Shouldn't it be the opposite way around? Shouldn't the $100 million man be smarter than the man in the damn frayed sweatshirt? Oh, my God. Book and New York Times bestseller, Presidential Courage, Brave Leaders and How They Changed America, 1789 to 1989. Michael, Beschloss. The New York Times book reviewer, Mary Beth Norton, writes, Presidential Courage is thoroughly researched in both published and unpublished sources. Oh, it gets critical acclaim up and down the Knotnilk. Let's dive into it with our set of eyes. 30 seconds of the preface, quote, end quote. This book shows how American presidents have, at crucial moments, made courageous decisions for the national interest, although they knew they might be jeopardizing their careers. It suggests that throughout our history, at times of crisis and urgent national need, it has been important for presidents to summon the courage to dismiss what is merely popular, and the wisdom to do that for causes that later Americans will come to admire. What the hell? He made grammatical and sentence structure mistakes in the first few lines of the book. Guys, I read that accurately. To dismiss what is merely popular, and the wisdom to do that for causes that later Americans will come to admire. Michael Beschloss. That was horrible. You should be ashamed of yourself. But let's move on to the meat of what's being presented, where kind of like mini reality breakdowns come. It makes no friggin' sense. Okay, the first few chapters, or several chapters of the book about the George Washington administration into the John Adams administration, but centered around this John Jay Treaty, 1794. John Jay, at one point, was Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Now, it was a treaty between the United States and Great Britain, 1794, to settle final unresolved issues. I mean, all of this, you'll see, just makes no sense to me, but let me just present the facts as they're here given to me and as the book presents them. So all sorts of political troubles started to come up because of this John Jay Treaty. Half of the politicians in the Senate and the House and Congress was for strengthening relations with Britain, and others were more Francophiles. They wanted stronger relationships with France based on how France assisted the United States during the... Okay, we know all these details. Yeah, guys, looking at this, let me just get all of these facts that are presented to us out, and we'll talk about it or comment on it later. Almost each section here just doesn't make any sense, but I don't want to start a side conversation every time. I don't know how to explain it this time. Well, what do you mean, Matt? It doesn't make sense. You don't buy the history? No, I'm not saying that. I don't know yet. I have no final conclusions. But just how strange is all this? Okay, the John Jay Treaty, half the U.S. and Congress was pro-Britain, half was pro-France. It says here, this is online, not from the book, the French Revolution led to war between Britain and France in 1793. The date of the French Revolution was somewhere in 1789, so roughly 4 years later. So what, they fought their 500th war? I mean, the French Revolution, it says here, led to war between Britain and France in 1793. How is France even able to fight a war. The French Revolution happens, the whole monarchy's thrown out, the whole country, as we're told in history, is uprooted in turmoil and guillotines and slicing heads and slicing heads and slicing heads. But just 4 years later, they go to war again? Okay, it says here online, still haven't gotten to the book, regarding the John Jay Treaty, which was the most divisive thing of all time, right in that 5-year period, the transition from Washington to John Adams. It says, this new treaty not only improved relations with Great Britain, but demonstrated American independence from France. It's just, okay, that's a little strange the way that's put. What do you mean American independence from France? I know they're not saying, Matt, they're not saying France ever ruled over America, but okay, why would it even need to be? Why would you even need a treaty to demonstrate independence from France? What does that even mean? Okay, from the book, I need to read for about a minute so you get a sense as to what is going on here. This crisis is brewing. War is on the horizon between the United States and France. Like, well, I'm not saying, guys, that like just because I don't remember this from my history books that it's a Mandela effect. I'm not saying anything like that. I'm not saying it's not completely as it went down. I'm saying the whole point as to how there could potentially be a war makes no sense if you just apply a bit of common sense on the back end. But let me read for a minute to set the stage here. Be about a minute and a half, I guess. Adams also had inherited from Washington his biggest challenge as president, the danger of war with France. What? France's newest revolutionary regime, called the Directory, had found Jay's treaty a hostile act. French privateers were ordered to seize and plunder U.S. ships on the Atlantic and the Caribbean. Adams resented the attacks and assaults and feared they would stop American trade. Quote, those treaty-breaking Frenchmen take every vessel, Abigail Adams wrote him. What is to be done with them? Like Washington, Adams knew that his young nation was ill-prepared to fight Britain or France. What? But Federalist papers were inciting the public against France. Blah, blah, blah asked why Americans must tolerate French insults and robberies. Adams feared that if the anti-French fever rose in America, America's modest army would have to be transformed into a many-bellied monster that might tyrannize the people and draw the country into unnecessary wars. Oh, remember that. He's saying, if this thing with France gets any worse, we're going to have to make our little tiny army, we're going to have to permanently create a massive army. Oh, is that the root of it? He agreed with an old friend, Eldridge Gerry of Massachusetts, who thought a large standing army was like a swollen penis, providing, quote, an excellent assurance of domestic tranquility, but a dangerous temptation to foreign adventure. Oh, and they related it to the phallus in this book. That's a coincidence, Matt. I don't think so. I don't know who wrote this. Maybe this guy that wrote this is the guy that draws the pentagram. I don't know. In Paris, the new French leaders refused the newly appointed U.S. envoy, Charles Cotesworth Pinckney. Okay, let's pause for a second here to see what the hell's going on. So as the pages of the book turn, it just presents one circumstance after another where the tensions are rising between the United States under the John Adams administration and France under whoever. This is post-French Revolution. And the conflicts on the high seas, the pirating of French ships taking over American ships. And what was the name of the envoy? Let me look it up. Charles Cotesworth Pinckney was the ambassador to France or envoy, and he's not received and he's thrown out. It just doesn't make sense from the French perspective. It doesn't make sense from the American perspective either. We'll look at both, but it starts. I'm not saying that this is not, quote, whatever this means to you, real history. I'm not saying it's a Mandela effect. I'm not going there. What it does scream to me, assuming these facts presented in the book really did arise during these time periods, it screams once again, one world system. Let's look at this from the French perspective. So 4 years or so, did I read online, after the French Revolution, they're then fighting another war. How many wars between Britain and France? Just 4 or 5 years after the French Revolution. Don't they have their own shit to get together? After the French Revolution, which threw out the monarchy, guillotined everybody that had the royal blood, whole new governments. Don't they have to get their own shit in order? Well, maybe the British invaded. Maybe they had to fight the war. Whatever, okay? But it's all real history. They fought a war. Now, that makes no sense. Okay, they have to get their own shit in order. Fine. But what's with these tensions with the United States? So 4 to 5 years after the French Revolution, they're in another war with Britain, yet they're pirating American ships and just poking America. Why would they do that? Under what? Why? There's no reason in the books given. Why are the French taking ships that fly the American flag? Or we're going to board and steal all the supplies. We're going to do this. We're going to throw out if anything were real, they'd be cozying up to the United States, saying, look what Britain's doing. The big bully, Britain, would still be seen as the bully from a United States perspective. They would be cozying up to the United States, not poking them. Every single ship that the U.S., this is the way it presents it. What did Abigail Adams say? Those treaty-breaking Frenchmen take every vessel. Why would you do that if you were France and you were fighting a war with Britain, right after the French Revolution, when your own house is completely in disarray? It makes no sense. Well, what are you saying? I don't know what I'm saying. We'll not read into anything. Maybe we'll do conclusions a half hour from now. Let it go till then. Continuing to read. The new president's, which is John Adams' offer to Jefferson, was not wholly altruistic. If Jefferson's mission failed and the U.S. had to fight France, it would be much more difficult for the vice president to oppose it. Jefferson knew his nation was nearing a crisis with France. George Washington, had been lucky to leave just as the bubble is bursting. What? Adams said the French had inflicted a wound in the American breast by insulting Pinckney, attacking U.S. ships, and trying to create, quote, fatal division among the American people. Pledging a fresh attempt at negotiation, he asked Congress to strengthen American defenses. Oh, here we go. Okay, the book goes on. This French diplomat, whoever this guy is, Charles Talleyrand, more insults to the United States, more documented insults, demanding this and that, asking or demanding America make payment for this or that. I mean, for why, I don't know. Pinckney told the French, no, you will not get a sixpence. Outraged by Talleyrand's arrogance, Adams asked his cabinet whether he should demand an immediate declaration of war. What? Okay, let's look at this from the United States perspective. One more revisit of the French perspective. Just years after the French Revolution, new war with Britain. Somebody sitting around a table says, I think we should piss off the Americans. Let's take every ship we can, steal their loot, badmouth them, throw out their ambassador. If anything were real, somebody or a few people at that table would say, are you out of your mind, boy? So we have all these troubles at home. We have a new war with Britain, and you want another war, and you want to make enemies with the United States. We might want to do that 10 years from now, but see, we got our own problems. So get the hell out of here and get your head out of your ass. That's what it would have been said at the table if anything were real. Okay, now from the U.S. perspective, you can be President John Adams. I'll try to be President John Adams. Matt, don't say that. You could invoke, he might come down or something like the way Denzel Washington invoked his character in Glory. I don't think so, but I'm just going to pretend, let's just say anything, if everything was real. Here, President Adams, yes, the French this is the first incident, say, whatever year it would be. The French just took this ship, just boarded this ship, stole this ship. All right, what do you want me to do about it? I don't know. Do you want to declare war, prepare for war? No. What are we supposed to do in response? They threw out our ambassador, Pinckney. So? Do nothing. We have an entire country here of resources. What shipping routes are? Well, they're invading our ships or they're taking our ships when we go to this port in the West Indies, and we go to. Well, then don't go to those ports in the West Indies. If they're, what do you want me to do? You want me to? Oh, we're going to fight a war. How are we going to get our army to France? We don't got no ships. If anything were real, he'd say, okay, well, that's terrible. Well, we'll send a letter to France saying, please stop it. But nothing would happen. Well, Matt, even anybody listening to me right now saying, well, there has to be a response. Why? This is an entire new country in the 1700s of timber and resources. What do you even need the ships going out for trade and supplies? You don't need anything. Everything's right here. The farming, the meat, the livestock, the buffalo, whatever. It's all here. I think real fight a war with France and have their ships land here and all this, go through all this shit again. If anything were real, it'd say, well, tell those, it's like the doctor says, it hurts when I do this, and the arm in a weird position. And the doctor says, then don't do that. Well, then stop doing those 3 or 4 trade routes that the French are taking your shit. Stop it. What do you want me to do about it? We have everything we need right here. Trade with somebody else. Well, there's certain types of products we get through these French shipping lanes or whatever. Like what? Then we're not going to get those. You want your Bordeaux wine? We ain't going to have it then. Make your wine here. We can make our own cane sugar. We can do everything right here. Who gives a shit what France is doing? That would have been the end of it. But then page after page in history book after history book, how the U.S. was this close to war with France. Oh, yeah. It screams back to what we talked about regarding Chechnya. You're relating Chechnya to post-revolution American history? Yes. One world system. Back to reading for 30 seconds. Pickering said all real Americans should be happy to fight France. It was time to reconsider a formal military alliance with Britain, which John Quincy Adams called the last bulwark against the universal domination of France. What? Universal domination of France? 5 years after the French Revolution and fighting another war with Britain, Attorney General Charles Lee felt war or national ruin. He said it needs to be war in the United States or national ruin. National ruin from the French seizing a few ships on some shipping lanes? Oh, who cares? Let them have them. What the hell is this bullshit? Guys, just went a few pages forward here. I got to read you some more of this. This is just unbelievable. We'll talk about possibilities on the back end. In the president's house, Adams scrawled out a truculent speech to Congress asking for a war declaration against France. Skipping, therefore Adams simply told Congress that the 3-man mission had failed and that all U.S. merchant vessels must now be armed. See the theme? The building of armies. The building of navies. Necessary. There is a route to Eisenhower's military-industrial complex speech. You think he was trying to warn anybody? Think again, folks. We'll talk about... Here's the route of Eisenhower's military-industrial complex out-of-control speech. The root of it all laid down right here. Not accidentally because of French incursions, all by design. We'll talk about it on the back end. Let me read more of this horse shit. Although still worried about their safety, Adams, I'm going to just laugh at Adams duly sent Congress the secret evidence that Talleyrand's shakedown attempt, referring to the French agents, blah, 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 blah. So this is another offense, France against the United States. Skipping, as soon as they read the file, House Republicans knew it would provoke a war against France and voted to keep it quiet. But the Federalist Senate, hoping to spread the fever of war, published 50,000 copies of it. So you have these same old thing. There's nothing new under the sun. The Republicans, as they were known back in the late 1700s, they didn't want war, but you had this war hawk, which is the Republicans today, because the script has to repeat just in a different fashion. They're called Federalists, and they all wanted war. They wanted war. Why? Because that's what our script says we need to scream for. Oh, my God. There's just 2 more things here. As war hysteria spread, the president of Yale University warned that French invaders might force American wives and daughters into legalized prostitution. I'm not joking. This is here. Somebody's screaming at me, Matt, this has got to be a Mandela effect. I'll keep anything on the table. It says the president of Yale, what does he know about anybody being forced into legalized prostitution? Check his basement. See who's chained up down there. He warned French invaders might force American wives and daughters into legal prostitution. Did the British do that? In the War of, 1812 hadn't happened yet. Maybe they got that idea from the French. Adams ordered muskets so that he and his servants could defend the president's house. The person that's screaming Mandela effect is, I hear you screaming it. Matt, this is too ridiculous to potentially have been considered real history, collectively agreed upon by academia. Let me read that one last time. This book, this is not a Mad magazine. This is the book, the definitive book written about presidential history and courage, one of the top 10 books written on this subject in 50 years. Adams ordered muskets so that he and his servants could defend the president's house. That's like in the Patriot, when the little kids went and he brought out the rifles. He put them back in the house, Samuel. What the hell is going on? And what happened to the real world before the 2001 job application? There's a lot more here, but it's like all saying the same thing. Hamilton, Alexander Hamilton, was demanding a 50,000-man army against the tyrants of France. But Adams remained unnerved by so large a possible army. I've always cried, ships, ships, he later wrote. Hamilton's hobby horse was troops, troops. But then they end up getting both, didn't they? Splitting the difference, Congress called for a provisional army of 20,000 men and a new Department of the Navy to oversee American frigates, new infrastructure, new defense infrastructure, Space Force infrastructure goes in, Department of Homeland Security. It goes in, it's like the Roach Motel, and it never goes away. A new property tax, reason for taxes, justification for taxes, justification for control. You don't want those French landing here without us being ready, do you, American public? See where this is going? A new property tax was imposed to pay for it all. Oh, boy. And in the warlike spirits that Adams had proclaimed, it passed the notorious Alien and Seditions Act. Oh, if you seem to be down with France, that little thing we just did 20 years before called the Constitution, we don't need that anymore. The roots of everything, right here. The president was also empowered to deport enemy aliens or anyone else he considered dangerous. What about that thing that was done in your lifetime, John, called the Constitution? Throw it out. Republican Congressman Matthew Lyon of Vermont, known as the Spitting Lion, for spitting at a Federalist, was arrested for anti-government writings, fined $1,000, and thrown into a prison cell used for fugitive slaves. So he's arrested for anti-government writings, but he was alive when the people laid down the Constitution like 6 months before, saying the right to free speech. See, Matt, I can hear you screaming at me. I got it. Yeah, Matt, this is showing us that thing, it ain't never existed. Yeah, I ain't no dummy. I hear you. More and more history as pages go on that, I don't know, I've never heard of. I can't speak for you, but here, George Washington is making a comeback. He's going to be the one to lead the army against France. He's like 180 years old at this time. This is all new to me, guys. It's right here. Adams was thunderstruck. Not only was George Washington demanding Hamilton, but until France invaded, he would stay at Mount Vernon and let Hamilton run the army himself. Skipping down, he drafted a letter to Wolcott. If I should consent to the appointment of Hamilton as second in rank, I should consider it as the most irresponsible action of my life. So what's going on here is this war, at this point, according to this history, this war with France is inevitable. They've already got General Washington back from president, back to the general position. He will then lead the army again at 180 years old. But Washington is in love with Hamilton in this history and wants Hamilton as the second in command over this tens of thousands of person army that's being raised now. Well, what does Hamilton know a thing about military command? I don't know if I slept through that history, but he wasn't out there fighting the Revolutionary War. Who knows where they all were, right? We've talked about that in the past. We know Washington was out there. What does Hamilton know about it? Of course, in the soap opera, Adams, the president, can't stand Hamilton, hates Hamilton. Hamilton hates Adams. But Washington, as the legendary figure, is going to get whoever he wants as the second in command, somehow Hamilton. And what did George say to, hey, Alexander Hamilton, what experience you have in leading armies? Nothing. Nothing. Did you just say nothing, honey? Nothing, honey. Okay, I like you a lot, though, and you look good in that suit. You're number 2. Well, John Adams hates me. Oh, well, I'll see to it that he puts you in there. I'm George Washington. What the hell is going on here? As a new president, John Adams had been exhilarated to be his own man, finally unbeholden to Washington and Hamilton, by creating a new army with those two leaders as its pinnacle. However, he had made them essentially co-presidents. Well, John, if you're listening, you're the president. You can appoint whoever you want, but isn't that might not be what's really being said here, Matt? Yeah, exactly. The way the HBO shows John Adams just complaining that they're making us go live in this White House that's still being built. Aren't any of the windows in? No, none of the windows are in. He's forced to go live. Maybe John Adams never had any mojo. If this is kind of what it's saying here, the military leaders were appointed and he didn't want them, but he's supposed to be commander-in-chief. What's really being said here? Continuing to read, but in Adams backing high Federalist taxes and military spending and the taxes to pay for that spending, Adams was helping the richest Americans make even more monstrous fortunes. Oh boy, the roots of the military-industrial complex. Not Eisenhower didn't warn you about anything. That was an admission of what already exists. They got to tell the truth. This is incredible, folks. Frommer's tried to warn you. Eurotrip. Eisenhower tried to warn you. He didn't try to warn us of anything. That whatever he's talking about, be careful, the military-industrial complex. What he was talking about actually increased 1,000-fold after the speech. What is Raytheon today? What is Boeing today? What is Lockheed Martin today? Of course. However, it had always existed. He wasn't warning anybody of anything. He had, it's just a truth drop the way they have to do that from time to time. Guys, this can go on for 20, 30 more pages. We're done. Last quote. It's the same thing. Then they did posters, and we need to raise an army, and then more taxes. It's just on and on and on, exactly the same themes that are discussed here. Last reading from the book, probably in this entire video. So thank God, Matt. The last straw was when the president learned that after 2 years of quasi-war on the Atlantic, the French were still causing U.S. vessels less trouble than the British. Oh, come on. I don't even know how to get my head around that. I got to pause. So the British were poking too. After all this, page after page, chapter after chapter, almost going to a war with France, this one line, or was it a quote from Adams? I don't remember. The French are still causing less trouble than the British? Well, then why wasn't there talk of another war with Britain because of the same naval activity and piracy and Pirates of the Caribbean? Oh, come on, man. Come on, sir. And what did that even mean, that statement, a quasi-war on the Atlantic? I mean, is this, I don't think this writer, this author's just making shit up, but the history itself is making shit up. Quasi-war on the Atlantic. So let me get this straight with the French. It says, after a quasi-war on the Atlantic for 2 years with the French, the British are having more trouble. So the French, a navy now for 500 years, colonizing countries thousands of miles away, naval expertise. What does the United States have to fight what was just read as a quasi-war in the Atlantic? What does the U.S. have? A few tiny merchant ships, but there was a quasi-war on the... Come on, give me a break. All right, so let's role-play the John Adams presidency one more time. If there was a degree of common sense anywhere in reality, whether it be this time period, we see the lunacy of this time period, Matt, per retrocausality, the lunacy of this date extends back through time. So here I am, John Adams, sitting in the Oval Office. Did that exist then? I don't know. Who cares? Mr. President, yes? The French have taken another ship. That's the 5th ship this month, where they've stolen the cargo. One of the ships they sunk. Who knows what they did to the others? What are you going to do about it, Mr. President? Nothing. What do you want me to do about it? Well, shouldn't we prepare for war? No. What do you mean, no? Well, see, we have a little problem here. See, we don't have a navy. There's a small problem here. Sit down, jackass, and I'll fill you in. Then you go fill those idiot Federalists in Congress. We don't got no navy. We can't go fight no war there. We can't get our troops. What do you want to swim across the Atlantic, invade France and Paris? We can't get there. The only option is they can come here. and see, just like with the British, if they land their ships here, oh, we'll be ready. See, that's all that they could do. If they want to land their ships here and fight a foreign war amongst us, now that we already have this incredible footing after we beat back the British, let them come. I mean, it will be a one-sided show, I assure you. Let them land here. But what about all the piracy at sea? What are you going to do about that, Mr. President? Nothing. Didn't you just hear me? We have to protect these cargo ships. Why? Tell them to trade with somebody else. Tell them to run routes where there aren't potentially French or British ships. Now they're saying the British are invading the ships and taking the loot and whatever. Guys, look, I understand that international trade existed back then. Okay, but it's one tiny little sliver of what it is now, with fleet after fleet of junk coming from China and the cargo ships and the big screen televisions and the rubber dog shit and the ceramic cats and all. It's one tiny little sliver. I understand trade existed and it was good to get some of, quote, the United States goods out there to buyers and to bring some stuff here. But you know what? Is it worth fighting a war with a world power when this country has all the resources for that population it could ever need, times a billion, has all the farmland, all the food, all the cattle that could be raised, horses, buffalo, sugarcane, molasses, everything that, quote, we need is right here. If they want to take the merchants can keep going on those routes, and they know there's a 20% chance the French are going to F them up and take their shit. It's up. That's on the merchant. We have something here called freedom of choice. If the merchant ships want to keep doing that, it's on them. To me, if they keep doing it, they're retarded or semi-retarded. Have them go trade with partners around the world where there's only a 5% chance of encountering a French ship. Have them arm the ships themselves the same way the French ships are armed. Have them go watch the movie in 1780, Master and Commander, to see how to fight back. But no, as the president, I'm not going to do a damn thing. I'm not going to prepare for war. I'm not going to do this or that or create a fleet, a navy for what? That's what would happen in a common sense scenario. But when the roots of the military-industrial complex needs to be laid down and you need to start the snowball rolling down the mountain, so that snowball by 2023 is the size of 15 million Mount Everests, then you need to, oh no, here it goes again, cook up a crisis. Matt, are you... Cook up a crisis with France, to justify the raising of a 40,000-man army, to justify the creation of a fleet of ships, and to justify the spark that led to what Eisenhower, it was a serious warning. He was on our side. The military-industrial complex. Are you saying that the United States really wasn't close to war with France? Yeah. Pretty damn obvious to anybody that doesn't have their head up their ass.